You're listening to Scaling Up Services, where we speak with entrepreneurs, authors, business experts, and thought leaders to give you the knowledge and insights you need to scale your service-based business faster and easier. And now, here is your host, business coach Bruce Eckfeldt.
Welcome, everyone. This is the Scaling Up Services podcast. I'm Bruce Eckfeldt. I'm your host. Today, we have a very special guest, friend, colleague, fellow EOer, Matthew Weiss, and we're going to talk a little bit about the business he started a few years ago, and how he grew it and how he successfully got himself out of the day-to-day so he could focus more on some of the legacy work he does. We're going to hear a little bit about that. But Matt, thank you for being on the program.
My pleasure.
So why don't we start? I like to have guests kind of start with a little bit of the background. Let's talk about your business, how you kind of started, sort of the early stages. How do you get into it, and what did it do? What problems did it solve for what people?
Sure. So I graduated law school and worked at a court for 2 years and then a big law firm for another 2 years. And during that second year at that big law firm, a friend of mine from law school who was out on his own kept calling me and asking me to, join him. And he was looking for a partner and looking for synergies that we had. He was a good rainmaker, and I was good at technically getting the work done and then building a practice. And so after 4 or 5 calls and thinking about it, I realized that this big law firm, after 6, 7 years, would spit me out, replace me by someone cheaper. And it would be difficult for me to get a partnership at this firm because they were looking for big clients, villages, towns, public companies. And those are very difficult to, as a young 27-year-old, try to get to join, your firm. So I gave my notice. We opened up shop and we had not much business, but there was one lawyer who was doing a fair amount of criminal work and traffic work. And because the criminal cases were higher fees, we were covering his traffic work for him. So we would literally be in traffic court on our feet all day covering his cases. But over time, we were starting to develop our own reputation and our own clientele, because when you're in court and someone walks in and they're anxious, they're nervous, they need help, they see someone dressed like a lawyer, they approach you and they say, are you a lawyer? I need some help. And so it got to a point where we were building up a fair amount of cases. I was giving out more business cards a month than I have in my life. Literally, I would go through a box of business cards a month. And I've never, since those days, given out so many business cards. Because, someone would meet you, you'd do their case. If you won or you got them a decent result, you would give them 10 or 20 cards and they would give it to their friends, right? And so we were still helping that other attorney, but now we're doing our work and doing this other lawyer's work. And then at some point it became like, yeah, we'll help you, because we had so much more of it because we were there every day building this brand and reputation. Yeah. And over time, I realized that I didn't want to be on my feet doing that every day, day to day, grunting it out, because it's hard work, right? And, for 20, 30 years of doing that would be difficult. Mm-hmm. And what I did see is that there were 4 or 5 other lawyers at pretty much every one of the New York City traffic courts that were doing the same thing, where they were in court regularly. And so I realized, well, since they're there anyway, they're happy for my business, why don't I just start a firm where I could market and promote, advertise, yellow book ads, things like that, and get the business and then use them as the people that deliver the service. And so these are attorneys that were in court anyway, that were happy for my business. It takes about 5 minutes to handle one case. And if I would give them sometimes 5, 6, 10 cases in a day, and it only took them 5 minutes per case. If they resolved it, some cases were just rescheduled for whatever reason. So a lot of times I would give them 10 cases, but they would only have to finish 3 or 4. Yeah. So it really wasn't a lot of time commitment on their part. And so I saw that I could pay them, a lot less than I could charge my clients. So I saw the room for a market here. Yeah. And so the key, I guess, was creating a brand that people would find me before they walked into court. And so we built that over time. And as you mentioned, we're both members of the Entrepreneurs Organization, EO. And through joining EO, among other things, I learned that just because you're a lawyer doesn't mean you have to follow what other lawyers do. Yeah. So we created a logo and a tagline, and we branded ourselves within the legal requirements for lawyer advertising, and really became and are known for fighting traffic tickets. Our phrase that we kind of own in the market is traffic ticket or New York traffic ticket. Mm-hmm. And having done it since 1991 till now, we've really built a great following. And on the early stages, it was yellow book ads, which some people may remember.
Some people may not.
Exactly. We did a billboard. We did a lot of radio ads. We had and we still do have a great toll-free number, 1-888-RED-LIGHT. And then this amazing invention came along that just changed everything, called the World Wide Web, and focused a lot of effort on that because it was much more efficient for us to put out in the world that this is what we do for people that are looking for us than to have a radio ad and hope that someone who's listening has a ticket, wants a lawyer, will remember our number, and actually follow up and call us, which was more like a needle in a haystack. So it was a push versus a pull kind of thing, right? So I doubled down and focused a lot of effort on that. And I still focus a lot of effort on my online marketing. And now social media came about and that as well. Yeah. And so through the years, we just continue to build that and focus on it, and always are working to keep our organic levels as high as we can for natural search. Yeah. And we did pay-per-click for a while, but our organic results were better than the pay-per-click, and we were getting such good organic results about 5 years ago that we stopped doing pay-per-click. Yeah. Because the leads were better and they were free. Yeah. So what I do is I focus my money on vendors that help with that organic search and help improve our standing, making sure that we are compliant with what Google and other search engines are looking for. And then, of course, we have a tremendous amount of word of mouth, we're customers, family, friends, things like that. That's kind of the business model. And it doesn't require me to be there day to day.
There's some of the great pieces I want to pull out of there, because I think that a lot of people particularly in kind of professional services, but services in general, kind of get stuck on, or they will hit a kind of a ceiling unless they figure out how to kind of change their business model. The one is figuring out part of the process do you want to specialize in? So in this case, it was really for you, it was how do I generate demand and how do I map it to the resources out there? So rather than actually being the lawyer in the courthouse fighting the case, it's, hey, I can find these leads. I can find people that need legal services, and I know that there's a market. I've been able to identify and communicate with a market of people who can provide the service, and I'm basically matchmaker, right? So how can I leverage and just get really good at that? Figure out, how do I find the right lawyers? How do I find, communicate with them efficiently? How do I create the demand? And then how do I map those things up? I mean, because that's a specific business model. It's a specific position to take in the business that I think a lot of professional services or services in general think, well, I have to be the one actually doing the work. And I think if you look at where the opportunity is and where's the inefficiency in the market, the other piece that I love is that idea of owning words or owning phrases. And it's something we talk about in the strategy side is the words that you own, but figure out like what is the vocabulary? How do customers think about the problem that they have? And being able to kind of capture those phrases and then own it not only from a kind of a search term point of view, but really from a market point of view. Like you're known as that person in the industry. If you have a problem like this, you are the person to go to. And I think a lot of services firms, end up kind of chasing money. It's like, well, I'll do anything for anybody, and they fight this idea of specialization. But in fact, the faster you want to scale, the more you need to focus, the more you need to specialize in the stuff. Do you think, did you have times where it was tempting for you to, branch off into other areas or to expand your services? Tell me a little bit about how religious were you able to be about that focus over the growth of the company?
So that's a great question. And I spent a lot of my time in the early years doing other type of work as well. So when I was in a traffic court, I would be writing contracts. I would be handling litigation matters, some criminal work, real estate work. I'm pretty versatile and could competently handle a lot of that work. But over time, I realized that the traffic business was such a good business that I could scale, that has good margins, that I needed to focus on that. And there was this ego element to get past, right? Being just a traffic lawyer. But over time, I got past it, and honestly, I would have scaled faster if I had focused on traffic from the outset. But it was always there. There was always a need for people to help, needing help with their traffic tickets. And so, I can't say that we generated demand because I think the demand was there. But what our model is, we will handle all aspects of the case in-house through myself or one of my in-house lawyers or paralegals, except with one court. But beyond that one court, then we use of-counsel attorneys who are associated with our firm and who we obviously vet and oversee and supervise. But our firm does some of the legal work. So we will enter a not guilty plea. We will get a date. We make sure that the lawyer we gather the paperwork that's needed, any evidence. We make sure that the lawyer has it. We assign the lawyer. And then once the case is resolved, then we report it to the client. When there's a plea bargain, if in some courts we can work out deals, we make sure that that plea is reasonable, and then we get the client's permission. So a lot of that is done in-house. But the thing that's done by of-counsel attorneys, which outside the legal world you might call subcontractors, is the actual appearance in court. So we reach that balance of still being a law firm, not solely buying or creating and selling leads, which is not what we're doing. So we are able to effectively deliver the service, comport with the legal requirements that lawyers have, yet exploit a need in the market and be able to make a living doing so.
Yeah. I'm curious how, one of the challenges I typically find, particularly on kind of, these kind of service-based businesses, as you start to scale, how do you maintain quality? How do you maintain process? What are some of the things that you've done that you think have helped you with the, as you kind of turn up the volume of the work that you're doing, that you're maintaining the quality in the process and you're making sure that you're still delivering effectively?
One really big thing we did, which really helped us grow, and I scratch my head why we didn't do it before we made the change. But it used to be when someone would call and hire us, then that person that entertained that call would actually handle the case from beginning to end. And at some point, we realized that wasn't working well. And so we created different positions, almost like departments, if you will. So now we have a couple of people that handle inbound calls and explain what we can do in the service. And of course, often I end up speaking to many of those people as well. But ultimately, they hire us. And once we're hired and the paperwork is signed, then it gets passed off to one of two other people who actually will follow that case and shepherd it through the process. And then we have a final person that handles fines and things like that. So by looking at the workflow and creating specialists, if you will, or focused responsibilities, that really kind of allowed the water to flow a lot quicker, kind of like a kinked hose when you're out in the garden. We unkinked the hose by changing how the roles on the bus were assigned. Yeah.
Any insights in terms of kind of the communication and keeping people, making sure everyone knows what they're doing at different times? I see kind of anytime you kind of start doing department stuff, it's like you create these handoffs, right? So how do you manage kind of these handoffs as it goes from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3?
So in our case, we have black and white, pretty clear triggers, right? So once the person hires us and signs the paperwork and they're in the system, then it gets handed off to one or two people, depending on where in New York State, because our law firm covers all tickets throughout New York State. So it goes to one of two people based on that. So it's a black and white trigger. There's no gray area there, right? Yeah. Then from there, once the case is resolved, then it goes to someone else. So again, we got the result. We know there's a fine due, and then someone who has to handle that and making sure that that fine gets paid. Yeah. So we have, I guess the answer is clear black and white, milestones in the process.
Yeah. And you have some kind of underlying technology to this? Is this something that you bought? Is this something you built? What was the...
Yeah, we built a system. I originally started with Salesforce, and we were trying to use that for our infrastructure. And unfortunately, I was conceding too many things that I wanted the system to do that it couldn't. Yeah. And I have about 70,000 into it, and I said, not working. And I had to start all over again with a cloud-based system that uses open source and it's custom to us. And what our system does is it does the billing, it does the calendaring, it does assigning tasks, and people can check off tasks that are done. So basically, it allows us to contact management. It basically allows us to run our entire law firm from that one location. The only other software we use separate and apart is QuickBooks for our business.
Yeah.
But it handles all the finances for the client and keeping track of payments and fines and monies and things like that.
Yeah. And I think, unfortunately, your story of spending a lot of money on a package to then have to build it yourself is not an uncommon one. The amount of money will vary, how long it took somebody to kind of figure it out. But, I think that whole kind of buy versus build decision it's a tough one, and it ends up being very kind of any heuristics or guidelines that you would suggest to people about, looking at that buy versus build decision that you think you would have maybe done differently?
Well, the big eye opener that people who, and myself included, don't realize when they're doing a project of that nature, a custom project, is that it's a tremendous amount of time commitment on you or your firm's part, your company's part. Just because you're paying someone and have hired them and paying them a lot of money to build the system doesn't mean that you can just, wipe your hands and get this magic result, in 90 days or 6 months later. It's a lot of meetings and give and take and reviewing and back and forth. They don't know your business like you do. And you can tell them, but until you see their wireframes and then their prototypes, it's a lot of work on your part to get it done.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the dollar number of the check that you write to them in terms of the cost of the software can sometimes be less than what it ends up costing you in terms of opportunity cost of time, particularly when you're dealing with fairly highly paid professionals that have to get the knowledge out of their head into the system. So yeah, I think budgeting that is important.
Yeah. And another thing that we did, which is unique, and because of the time commitment, I seriously doubt any of my competitors will ever do this. We created 3 tools that are free to use on their web applications, which one's a ticket calculator, one's a ticket analyzer, and one's a ticket strategizer. So the calculator will tell you how many points your ticket carries. Mm-hmm. The analyzer will make a recommendation should you fight it and why. And then the strategizer will explain how to fight your ticket based on the court. And they're robust tools. These are not simple tools that get you to call up to get more information. Yeah. They essentially do every single thing that I would do or any other person analyzing the situation with the knowledge that I have would do. So for instance, if you have a license from Missouri and you get a ticket in New York, you're going to want to know what's the interplay. How does that affect me in Missouri? Yeah. And our system will tell you that. If you have a restricted license, we'll tell you the effect of this particular ticket on your restricted license. So there's a series of questions, but it's a simple 3-step process. And that took, I can't even tell you how many hours and hours of logic and programming to perfect. And we, of course, had to get it tested and it was a huge commitment on our part, but it gives us a strategic advantage or competitive advantage because my competitors don't offer that.
Yeah.
And what it does is it really is a white paper on steroids, right? Anyone who knows about marketing, right? Anyone who knows about marketing knows give something away of value, something that people would want to give their email address away for, and you'll get whatever it is, 10 tips or something like that.
Yeah.
And so what we're doing is we're giving away valuable information for your email address. But by the same token, because we're analyzing your ticket, we now know that you have a Queen stop sign ticket scheduled for July 12th.
Yeah.
So not only do we have your email address, but we have your information. And now we're able to drip on you in a customized way some full information about your case beyond the 3 things that tools I already described. We might tell you where to how to dress or where to park, and all specialized to that particular court. And again, being helpful and being top of mind. So it becomes this amazing tool to provide a customized drip campaign.
Yeah. And I think full disclosure, I think I used you for a stop sign violation in Queens. So that was probably my case. And I think that's interesting because I think a lot of people would shy, or at least some people would shy away from providing that much help. I mean, at some level, you're giving away a lot of what you do in this tool. Like, what was the justification for putting that kind of value or that kind of capability, out into the world?
Yeah, I actually learned that from Seth Godin, the great marketing guru. And he once said at a session I was at, he says he gives everything away. His blog is free. His content is free. He gives it all. He writes these books that you basically can get his content for the price of a book. He gives it all away. But if you want him to show up and do a keynote at a conference or an event, that's when you're going to pay. You're going to pay very handsomely because he gets very, substantial fees.
Yeah.
And I felt the same way. Like, I can give it away. I'm happy to give it away. You'll never be able to fight the case as well as me, even if I tell you the process and how we do it. And by the way, no one wants to spend the time to do it.
Yeah.
It's a commitment. And so our fees are so reasonable for a lawyer, someone who's licensed and went to law school and delivering a legal service, and for the time that we put into a case that we could provide, given that we're doing volume and we have these economies of scale, that I can share all that, and still most people are happily going to hire me anyway.
Yeah. And I think that's a fairly evolved way of thinking about it. I think a lot of people end up kind of with this kind of more scarcity mindset about doing stuff like that. But yes, giving information out there, giving the capabilities, it actually becomes a great filtering tool, right? Like the people that really are going to go through it and fight it themselves probably are not, customers for you. They're not prospects for you, right? The people that are going to try and then halfway through say, oh, I should just hire them, and it's a great way to kind of actually filter those folks out.
Yeah, and the more they know, the more they realize, this is something that they really don't want to do, and that it's more complicated than they thought. And the thing about a traffic ticket, unlike other purchases, is they're very emotional. People are angry, they're scared.
Yeah.
There's different severe, stressful. People get different emotions from traffic tickets.
Yeah.
And so as a result, they often will rely on a professional to help them deal with it because they just want it off their plate. They feel like they have a better chance to win.
Mm-hmm. No, all true. Good. So you've built this company, you've built these systems, you've built the marketing engine, the brand recognition. I think one of the key things is around scaling businesses is, once you're successful scaling, what do you do? And it's oftentimes a question we ask in the beginning, which is, well, say you're successful in scaling it, why? Like, what do you want to do with it? And I think you've particularly done a phenomenal job of really using the business as a tool, as a vehicle, no pun intended, to get to this kind of bigger purpose, this bigger impact you want to have. Tell us a little bit about how, when you started to think about the bigger picture, when you thought about what kind of impact you want to make on your community, on society, on the world, and how that played into your kind of business planning process.
Sure. So I actually created the time so that when the opportunity arose, I would be able to take advantage of it. Didn't know what, when, how, but at some point I realized that I didn't want to be working 8 hours a day doing the operations of the law firm and being in that business. And it's not because I didn't like the business. It's just I've done it. It wasn't challenging. And I also felt that I could do other things that would be interesting to me. And so I had this vision, well, how can I get myself out of the business but still run it effectively? So I just slowly figured out, all right, what do I do every day? What are my responsibilities? And I kind of just made a list of what I do. And so then I said, okay, well, what can I stop doing? What can I abdicate? And so I mentioned earlier, we abdicated doing real estate and commercial work. So we abdicated certain work, and that freed up time for me, right? And it took a little bit of time because I had to get rid of some cases that were pending, but that was the first process. Then, okay, so things that I wasn't going to abdicate, what can I automate? What can I create a system that no people need to touch that are part of my responsibility? So my responsibility is to get the phone ring. That's one of my responsibilities. And so being responsive to emails that come in from our website as quickly as possible in a customized manner is important. So I actually created a system that allows for automated emails to be sent, but they're customized to the court and the charge, the offense that someone has. So now that's something that I had a responsibility for that I don't anymore because it's now automated, right? And then the third leg of the stool was delegate. All right, so what are the things that I'm doing that I could give to someone else to handle? Again, freeing up my time. And a big one for me was sales. I felt like no one in my office could sell as well as I. The best salesperson. But then I had this light bulb moment, and I realized that if I could have someone that's 80% as good as me, then that's good enough.
Interesting.
Because while 80% of me will not close as many people, and certainly there'll be less income coming in, it frees up hours of my life, hours of my life that I'll never get back. That's the most precious resource we have is time on this earth. and no one knows how much you have. So if you could free up time in your life and be able to do things that you love, that make you happy, why not? So it's a process of abdicating, automating, and delegating. And so through that process, I freed up enough of my time. Now, I still work on my firm. I still do things that need to be done, but it's not the same commitment of time that I previously worked. And so along the way, I volunteered for not-for-profits, including Entrepreneurs Organization, as you know, and I've done other things with my time. But the one I'm particularly proud about is started with a lunch with my banker. And I went to lunch with my banker, Jeff Crowther, and he told me a story about his son, Wells. Wells passed away on 9/11, and obviously their family was devastated, and he was a great kid. If you heard more about him, you appreciate it. But, he was a captain of his hockey team, and he always looked out for others first. And this family was utterly devastated. And 8 months later, the family learned about his heroics, and it's all connected to this red bandana. Yeah. And he was an incredible hero on 9/11. And I just thought it was one of the most incredible stories I'd ever heard. I thought everyone needed to hear that story. And then I said to myself, you need to share that story with everybody. So while I never had an experience in making a film, I never had a bucket list to make a film, I never took a class in filmmaking, I decided that I was going to make a film about this story. And so while there are filmmakers that look for stories, this was a story that I found a filmmaker. Yeah. And because I had set up my business in a way that allowed me to have some free time, I was able to take advantage of that opportunity. And after 6 years, completed a documentary film about Wells. It won an award at an international film festival. It was released from coast to coast in theaters, which is, most documentaries don't get released theatrically. Yeah. And it's currently on iTunes and Amazon. It's called Man in Red Bandana. I'm very proud of it, and the family loved it. Allison and Jeff in particular, the parents, and obviously they were the most important critics that I cared about. Yeah. And I felt that by sharing that story, hopefully it'll encourage other people to be better people and to inspire them to do great things and think of others first. I think there's a lot of me in this world, and if we could all be a little less selfish and a little more selfless, this world is an incredible place. And I'm hoping sharing Wells' story and even my story in making this film will encourage people to do things that are in that vein.
Yeah. So, and I'll make sure that the links to the film and to the information on the film are in the show notes and next to the videos and stuff. And I think the interesting piece, and first of all, kudos. I've seen the film I think at least twice now. Very touching. It's fascinating to hear your story about how it was created and your work with the family, and really just kind of the reveals of how you kind of learned about it and kind of discovered more information as you went, and the kind of the use of the networks, and kind of how not only did the business give you kind of the time and the kind of resources to do it, but really the community and the relationships and the connections to actually make this stuff happen. The interesting thing about the whole process for me is that I was in my business, I had a very clear sense of this new purpose that I wanted to do, and then figured out how to get myself out of it. You consciously chose to say, hey, look, I'm not sure what it is yet, but I know there's something else that I need to do, in this world to serve. And I can't do it if I'm neck deep in my day-to-day business. And actually having the discipline and the foresight to actually get yourself out of it and then experiment and kind of, be out there and put yourself, into the world to make that opportunity happen is, I think, a phenomenal story. And I think anyone who's caught up in business, and it's an easy thing to get caught up in, right? Like, I'm the next $1 million in revenue, the next acquisition, the next geography that I want to roll out to. It's very easy to just kind of get wrapped up in growth for growth's sakes, rather than growth for getting you to some place where you can actually shift the focus or shift the way in which you're going to have impact in the world. So, kudos to you in terms of.
Yeah, I would say your business is for your life. Your life should not be your business. And unless you're really passionate about doing what you do, then figure it out. And this did not happen overnight. That process of automating, delegating, abdicating did not happen overnight. It happened over time and with effort. And I certainly needed to build a volume of business. We had to grow sales in order to accomplish my vision. But the first thing and most important thing is have that vision, right?
Yeah.
If you get to an Uber tonight, you tell the cab driver where you want to go, right? And then he or she will figure out the route to get you there. But if you don't have a destination, you're never going to figure out the route. So I had the destination of freeing up that time, and then I figured out the route to get there.
Yeah, that's great. And I hear you're working on another film now too. Tell us a little bit about this next one.
Yeah, so it's called Vault. The single best part of being involved with the second film was that I never thought I'd be involved with a second film.
Famous last words, yeah.
Well, I made the first film with no intentions to make another movie. It was purely to share that one story. I never even thought of this being a career. I just thought I need to share and tell this story in the best manner possible.
Yeah.
As worthy of this hero, this sterling individual that saved so many lives on 9/11. And so I was, knee deep in it, focused to get it done after 6 years. And along the way, I met a fair amount of people, one of which helped me get it finalized and distributed. And he had a lot of experience making films, and he worked with me. He saw that I was a go-getter, organized. I followed through with my commitments, and he said I was smart. Actually, he said I was smart because he's from New England. He's a friend of mine from New England now. And so now he's a business partner of mine. And he asked me if I would want to be involved with his new project. He sent me the script, and I just loved it. It's called Vault, and it's about a heist from a vault that happened in 1975. $30 million was stolen from this vault in Providence, Rhode Island. Mm-hmm. And so to this day, it's the largest heist from a vault in U.S. history. And one of the twists that you find out pretty early on in the story is that this vault was not in a bank with paperwork and regulations, but rather it was in the basement of a fur showroom. In fact, the fur showroom was really a front for the vault. And that's because this vault was where the New England mob would keep their cash, their jewels, guns, and all other kinds of crazy stuff. And it essentially was the bank of the mob. Yeah. And it's an active bank, back and forth. And, all day people would coming and going, making withdrawals and deposits in this vault. And so it's an amazing story because it obviously can't end up well for these guys, notwithstanding that they, at least initially, were successful.
Wow. Yeah. So fascinating.
I love the fact that I had no desire or plans to make another film, but I also love that now I'm involved with a major feature film. Chaz Palminteri, Don Johnson are in it, among other stars. Cast is incredible. I was on set, looking and learning about so many different things that are different from a documentary, and to be at a producer role on a major film that I think is going to be a special film and really well received and a huge commercial and artistic success. I am so elated, and it's like pinch me. Like, this is so much fun.
Well, and that's the purpose, right? Or that's the goal, right? Is to build a business that serves you and gives you opportunities to do, wonderful, exciting things. I think 100% achievement on the goal of getting to that point in professionally. So the big question is, are you going to do a third?
Possibly. I have some ideas. I have an idea for a documentary. There's a couple of opportunities to do features. It's amazing. All you need to do is make one film, and people come out of the woodworks and they want to be extras. They want to show you their screenplays, and they think that I'm this big, successful, experienced filmmaker, and I'm still learning as I'm going anyway, but it's amazing how people gravitate to that. And I was at a couple of film festivals with my first film, Man in Red Bandana, and actors and actresses that you've heard of were interested in talking to me because I had on my badge, it said filmmaker, and I had a film in the festival. Because as an actress, it is the single worst job you could have. You are perpetually auditioning and interviewing for a new job. And even if you get one, you don't know how long it's going to last. And most likely you're going to have to interview for a new job 5 to 50 times a year. Yeah. And unless you're like a Jennifer Lawrence or Bradley Cooper, it's very tough out there for actors and actresses.
I can imagine. Matt, this was a pleasure. If people want to find out more about you, about the films, about the business, what's the best way to kind of get that and, contact information?
Sure. Well, MatthewWeiss.com is my personal website, and my traffic ticket law firm website is 888redlight.com. And then, of course, maninredbandana.com is the first film. So any one of those will work.
I'll make sure all those links are in the show notes and stuff so people can get to those. It's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for taking some time. I really had a lot of fun on this.
Me too. Thank you.
You've been listening to Scaling Up Services with business coach Bruce Eckfeldt. To find a full list of podcast episodes, download the tools and worksheets, and access other great content, visit the website at scalingupservices.com. And don't forget to sign up for the free newsletter at scalingupservices.com/newsletter.